Chapter 5.
Chapter 5. You sure took a long while getting ready this morning, Mommy said. Jenna sat next to Mommy in the front seat of the buggy as she drove them to the Miller's house. Mom was sitting in the back seat holding on to what would be their contribution to the meal that day. A large coconut cake, a pan of yamasetti, and a basket full of yeast rolls. They were Jenna's favorite, all of them. She would be hard-pressed not to eat too much today. She didn't want to embarrass herself. She just wished that the weather had turned out nicer. Thick dark clouds blocked the sun and threatened rain on their picnic. Mom would say it was about the getting together, not the where of the getting together. Sometimes when she said things like that, it took Jenna a minute to understand, and this time was no different. But she figured out that her mom was saying that going to visit was more important than the weather, and if they couldn't have a picnic, then they would do something else. But she was disappointed with the idea. She had been looking forward to it. At least she would still get to see Buddy again. Jenna smoothed an imaginary wrinkle in her apron and managed not to look Mommy in the eyes as she answered, "Just wanted to make sure I was presentable today." Mommy snickered. This from the girl who is hard-pressed to brush her hair out every day. Jenna's hands flew to her head. "I always brush my hair out every day." Well, here lately she did. She had made it a point ever since last Sunday when she first talked to Buddy Miller. Suddenly, the things that she was supposed to do made sense. All the brushing of the hair when no one was going to see. No one was going to see. Brushing her teeth at night. It wasn't like she was going anywhere, and starching her fur gut apron on a beautiful Sunday morning. But she glanced behind to see if Mom was paying attention. Thankfully, she wasn't. Jenna didn't think she could take teasing from the both of them. They meant well, she knew. But this was important, and she didn't want anyone poking fun at it. It's good to get out today, yeah? Mommy said. It wasn't really a question. Jenna had learned that a long time ago. It was the way Mom and Mommy told her how things would or should be. They wanted her to get out today and visit with new people in the community. So they told her how good it was. It didn't matter if she agreed or not. They were always making decisions like that, and she had let them, but she wasn't sure she was willing to do that much longer. She was 20 years old, almost 22, almost 21. She should be allowed to make a few decisions for herself, especially ones like whether or not it was a good day to be out. Yeah, she said, because it really was. Not because she was told to think so. It was double good because in just a little bit she would get to see Buddy Miller again. She should have written down all the questions she wanted to ask him. Now that she was actually on her way to his house, she was a bit nervous and even more excited, and all those questions were flying around inside her head, slippery like someone had coated them with grease and turned them loose. I know we met the Miller children at church, Mommy mused. I remember someone saying, but I don't remember any of them. Buddy, the word was out of her mouth and hanging in the air between them both. She even had a chance to think about the cost of saying it. Mommy shot her a sideways look. Oh yeah? Jenna nodded. She had already said it. There was no taking it back now. I met Buddy at the singing. He's nice, and Jonathan, he was there. She said the last to keep Mommy from getting suspicious. Seems like the Millers have quite a few young boys in their family. Jenna shrugged and tried to make it seem as unimportant as possible. I guess. I wouldn't know. 2 isn't so many, is it? Though there could be more. Mommy glanced her way again. Jenna shrugged, hoping the action looked normal and not as forced as it seemed. She felt like she had been put under a glass dome, like the twirling clock Mommy kept on the mantle. Everyone could see her from every angle. There was no place for her to hide. Jenna? Mommy's voice was soft, gentle, and had lost all its teasing quality. You know that I believe you are such a special girl. Jenna hated when sentences started out that way. It only meant that she wasn't going to like what was coming next. But you're different than most. I know. Jenna tried to look bored, but she wasn't sure she had succeeded. At any rate, Mommy continued as Jenna wondered how long it would be before they got to the Miller's house. That was the biggest problem. With moving to a new place, she never knew how long it was going to take to get somewhere. Boys, Mommy started once again, but stopped and cleared her throat. Men who are looking for a wife need a woman who can take care of a house and a family. It's the woman's job to support her husband and care for their family so that he can go out and work. Do you understand that? Jenna nodded. How could she not? They had explained it to her countless times. Those men need a wife whose brain works in every way. You understand? For the first time in her life, she did. She really did. You're saying I won't ever get married? You're saying I won't ever get married. Her words fell flat. It's a shame, but most likely not. There were those words again. Such a shame. But they didn't sting as bad as the rest of what she said. Mommy thought she would never get married. No man would have her. She was incomplete. But he watched from the window in his family's front room as the carriage pulled up. Like everyone else in Wells Landing, the Burkharts drove a horse and buggy on Sundays, as was required. Even on non-church Sundays, he took a deep breath as Jenna jumped down from the buggy. Then he raced outside to help the ladies bring in the food they had brought. He had made himself wait to go out, not wanting to appear too anxious to see her again. But he was. She turned around as he got close, and the expression on her face made him stop right there in his tracks. Jenna? He couldn't tell if she was angry or sad or something else, but he could tell from the clouds in her eyes that something was wrong. There weren't really clouds in her eyes, but they had lost their sparkle, and it was the best way he could think to describe them. In an instant, her face changed. She smiled, but her eyes remained the same. Whatever was bothering her, she didn't want him to know. The thought saddened him. He thought they had a better friendship than that. You big dummy. You've made this more than it is in your own mind. Quit making up a relationship and see what happens when you actually talk to the girl. That's what Jonah would say. In all but that big dummy part. But he had added that himself. I came to help you bring in your stuff. She nodded, that weird smile still on her face and lips. Young man, her mother called from the back of the buggy. Can you help Young man, her mother called from the back of the buggy. Can you help Mom out first? She asked. Her grandmother was already around on the other side of the carriage, pulling out plastic containers. Of course, he went to the side of the buggy and helped her mother to the ground. Why are you riding in the back? He asked the question without thinking first, and immediately wished he could call it back. It was none of his business, but it seemed strange that a mom would sit on the back seat while her daughter rode in the front. She didn't trust me to keep the cake from spilling on the floor. Jenna's smile wavered. It wavered a bit. Was that what she was angry about? Was she angry? You have a history of inattention. Her mother smoothed down her apron and the sides of her prayer covering. One time, Jenna held up her pointy finger to back up her words, and one time too many, her mother smiled, but he could tell that her words stung Jenna. Then the woman fetched something from the back of the buggy and handed it to him. It was still warm. The yeast rolls, she explained. I trust you can handle the responsibility? Yeah. Buddy nodded. Was Jenna's mother always like this? I'll get the cake, her mom said. Buddy thought her name was Charlotte, but he wasn't quite sure. Maybe it was something that sounded like Charlotte, but he couldn't think of a name that rhymed. Go on, she said, as he lingered there. He glanced back at Jenna. Her grandmother had already gone into the house, and apparently there were only 3 items to be taken in, so Jenna was just standing there, empty-handed and lonely looking. Buddy wanted to take her hand and to lead her into the house, but he was afraid if he only had a one-handed grip on the rolls, that he might drop them. He looked to Charlotte. He looked to Charlotte. He wasn't sure it was worth the risk. Follow me, he said to Jenna, but didn't look back as he started for the house. She stayed behind him as he made his way into the kitchen, where the family had already gathered. Prudy, his little sister, and Jonathan, his brother, along with his mother and father. The rest of the Miller clan were off with their own families. Hannah was with her husband, and Jonah with his wife. Aaron wasn't married yet, but he was visiting with Mary Ebersole. Buddy was pretty sure they would get married in a year or so. Maybe they had been dating forever, it seemed. It had been threatening to rain all morning, and the plan for a picnic had shifted to the indoors. Mom had spread the red and white checkered tablecloth, which they used when they had actual picnics, across the table. It was festive and familiar, but he really wanted to go outside to eat. It's not raining, he pointed out as he set the he pointed out as he set the container of rolls on the table. They smelled so good. His mouth was beginning to water. Mom didn't bother to turn from her plate at the counter. She was slicing cheese and meat. He had wanted her to make something special like fried chicken and smashed potatoes, but she refused, stating that it was Sunday and a day of rest. He supposed that frying chicken and smashing potatoes was a little too close to work for his mom. He had tried not to be disappointed. Mom didn't usually make a big meal on Sundays. None of the Amish women he knew cooked big meals on Sundays, but he was still a little sad. "Charlotte," his mother exclaimed as she looked at the food they had brought in. "This is too much. You shouldn't be cooking so much on a Sunday." Charlotte waved away his mother's words. At least he had gotten her name correct, even if it was only in his thoughts. "I keep this sort of thing in the freezer for Sundays. It keeps a body from having to eat cold cuts on the Lord's Day." His mother paused ever so slightly, then nodded her head. "That's a smart plan." Charlotte smiled, and the moment passed. But for a second there, Buddy thought there was about to be an argument. "Are you sure we can't go outside?" Prudy asked. She grabbed a grape off the plate his mother was making and popped it into her mouth. If Buddy had done that, his mother would have smacked his head and shooed him from out of the kitchen. But Prudy could get away with almost anything, he supposed. That was just one of the perks for being the youngest. A person might think that since he was special, he would get special treatment to go along with it. But all his life, Buddy had to work harder to get everything he wanted. That wasn't special at all. "We cannot," Mom said. "Put this on the table and don't drop it." She handed Prudy the tray of fruits, then picked up the meat and cheese and carried it over herself. Jenna scooted toward Buddy. He knew because he had been thinking about her since he had come into the room. "Are we really going to have a picnic inside?" she asked. Buddy tried not to smile at the fact that she was talking to him, not on the floor. Doesn't a picnic have to be outside?" Jen asked. "Only if you think that." She mulled that over for a moment, then straightened and nodded. "I suppose." But he wasn't convinced that she was convinced. Only that she wanted to be convinced. He leaned in closer, doing his best not to take a deep breath. so near to her. She smelled so good, like wildflowers and biscuits. It was enough to make him forget what he was going to say. Jonah calls it thinking outside the box. He finally managed. "Who's Jonah?" "My brother." She gave a pointed look toward Jonathan, but he shook his head. He's not here today. He is older, married. He was kind of glad Jonah wasn't there. Everybody loved Jonah, and if he had been there, Buddy was certain that Jenna would only notice him, and Buddy would be out in the cold, as people say. His mother pinned him with a look. "Come get the plates and set the table." "Yes, Mom." He started toward the table and his chore, but Jenna was quick and beat him to it. "I'm supposed to do that," he told her. "I just want to help. But that's my chore." And he didn't want someone else doing it for him. "Buddy, your guest wants to help," Mom said. Pretty and Jonathan were catering food to the table. Everyone had a job but him. He crossed his arms and tried not to pout. His mother didn't like when he did that, but he didn't like losing his chores to his guests. Why are you mad?" Pretty asked. "If you really want to do something, take care of my chores." "I don't want to do your chores," Buddy grumbled. Pretty shrugged and tossed her covering strings over her shoulders. "Suit yourself." His young sister had always been what Dad called a spirited child, but she had been especially spirited since she started school. It had been almost 2 school years, and it seemed to be getting worse. She acted like she was the only one who had ever learned anything, like she knew more than everyone else, like she knew more than he did, because he was special. "I went to school too, you know." Buddy tightened his arms across his chest and gave a nod. "Mom, Buddy's being ugly." "Dad," Buddy called. Pretty's being a tattletale. "And what are you?" Her voice turned extra sassy. Buddy could feel the heat creep into his face. He had looked at himself one time when he felt this way, and his entire face had been bright red. It probably looks like that right now. "Here," Jenna thrust the paper plates at him with a shake of her head. "I just wanted to help you." Buddy looked at the plates. "You can do it." He didn't want to take it away from her. If she really wanted to help set the table, it wasn't about that anymore. It was about Prudy trying to show him up in front of guests, in front of Jenna, and now it had turned into a mess. He sucked in a deep breath, all too aware that everyone was watching him, wondering what he would do next. 2 weeks ago, he might have lost his temper completely, but 2 weeks ago, he had never heard of Jenna Burkhart. "I'm sorry, Prudy," Buddy said. He felt the tension seep out of his body. Not all of it, but most. Jonathan and Mom shared a look. Dad shook his head and seemed like he was grinning. Prudy tossed her cap strings once again. "You are forgiven, Prudy." Prudy. Dad's voice was low with warming. Eli. But Dad held up one hand and waited for Prudy. "I'm sorry, Buddy." He could hear the unwillingness in her voice, but she said it. "Now," Dad said, and everyone started with their chores again. Mom didn't look happy over the exchange, but she couldn't be any less happy than Buddy was. He was embarrassed, and in front of Jenna, she held the plates out to him, and he shook his head. "I want you to do it," he said. Getting upset he had been a mistake. Getting upset had been a mistake. He had quickly recovered, but why had he been so stupid? He wanted to smack himself on the forehead, but he didn't. It was another feat he was proud of, but he didn't want to say as much, not in front of Jenna. "Come on, everyone," Dad said. "It's time to eat." She had only wanted to help. Jenna stared at her plate and wished she had never come to the Miller's house. But that thought made her even sadder. If she hadn't come there, then she wouldn't be sitting at their table, eating a makeshift picnic while the rain lightly sounded off the tin roof. She wanted to say something. She wanted to apologize. She felt like Buddy was in trouble, and it was all her fault. But sorry didn't seem to be enough. "Yes, our Jenna Gale," Mom said, and Jenna realized that she had slipped so deep into her own thoughts that she hadn't been paying any attention to what was being talked about around her. She looked up from her plate, not knowing what to say, but understanding that she needed to say something. I was telling Gertie how much you love to cook." Jenna nodded and smiled. She did love to cook. She was always baking something or another. Sometimes she used pre-made mixes that she found at the grocery store. but her favorite dishes were ones that she found recipes for when she went to the library. The librarian had shown her how to look on the internet and find recipes without getting other information that she really didn't want. The nice lady had also assured her mother that there were guards on the computer that kept really questionable information from showing on the screen. That was good because it meant her mother let her do what she would on the computer without looking over her shoulder. It was that very assurable that was going to allow her to look up Down syndrome when she went back into town, and she would surely have to do that now. She was fairly certain that Buddy wouldn't want to talk to her about anything after today. "I love to eat," Buddy said. Everyone laughed, and Jenna allowed her gaze to wander in his direction. He was looking at her and smiling. She gave him a hesitant smile in return. Maybe things would be okay after all. She did her best not to get her hopes up, and she finished up her meal. She felt a little weird that her mom had made a casserole and a cake to bring when Buddy's mom and more closely followed the ordnung, nor had she contradicted her mother on their Sunday habits. Sometimes she had made them casseroles and such for Sunday's meal, but mostly she did like everyone else and took the day off from cooking and ate easy to prepare foods like sandwiches made with peanut butter spread and crackers with cup cheese. Jenna loved cup cheese. After the second prayer, Gertie stood and instructed the kids to clear the table. Since Jenna was in the group, she started to help, but Jonathan and Buddy shooed her out into the screened-in porch at the back of the house. There were comfy chairs out there and tables to set things on. There was also a coffee table big enough for board games. Jenna loved board games, but she didn't get to play them very often since there were only 3 in her family. Mommy would play with her a little, but you needed more than two to really play. She eased down onto one of the chairs. She sat back, then leaned forward and scooted over to one side. It was strange sitting on someone else's back porch alone. Maybe she should ignore the instructions of Buddy and put his siblings of Buddy and his siblings and go in search of the adults. Chances were they were sitting on the front porch watching the rain. Why should she be back here alone? Or perhaps this was a joke. Maybe the kids were teasing her. Maybe everyone else was out front laughing because she was out here all by herself. That had to be it. Jenna pushed to her feet, intent on marching through the house until she found everyone. This might be a joke to them, but it sure wasn't funny to her. Where are you going, Jenna? She jerked her attention to Buddy. He stood in the doorway that led from the house onto the porch. He had 2 drinks in his hand and something tucked under one arm. She stopped rubbing her hands down the front of her dress, then crossed her arms. Nowhere. She tossed her strings behind her shoulders and almost dared him to contradict her. Buddy smiled and she felt her defensive stance soften. She wasn't mad, not really, but she was sort of cautious about new people. Her mom and mommy were constantly telling her that she was different, and because of that, people would try to take advantage of her. According to them, she had a double problem. She was not only simple, she was Amish, and the English people would view her as different enough to take advantage of her. Take advantage. They always said English people, but she understood they meant the Amish people too. But at least with her own kind, only had one thing against her. That was that she was simple. She had been waiting all day for something like that to happen. She had wanted to come to so badly, and now that she was there, she was too worked up to even enjoy herself. "Wanna play a game?" Buddy asked. "A game?" He set the cups on the coffee table, then pulled the flat box from under his arm. "Candyland," he grinned. Then the smile failed as he... Then the smile failed as his face wrinkled into a frown. "Everyone says it's a baby game, but I think it's fun." He leaned a little closer. "I like the names of all the places." He waited, and when she didn't immediately answer, he went on. "And it's okay to play with 2 people." Jenna finally found her voice. "Prudy doesn't want to play?" He shook his head. "Nah, she says it's for babies. But she's almost 8, he finished for her. "Almost 8, he finished for her. "I would really like it if you played with me." "Jenna, no one else will." How could she say no? Okay, Buddy Ivandale. I would love to play Candyland with you." Once the words were out of her mouth, he relaxed. She could see his shoulders drop, and and the tension leave his face. Had he really worried that much that she would tell him no? He kept on the He knelt on the floor next to the coffee table and slid the lid off the box. He hummed to himself as he set up the board. "Buddy?" Her voice was hesitant, though she wished it would sounded more confident. "Yeah?" He looked up from the board game. His eyes were brown, not just any brown, but a sweet, rusty brown, like dark honey. "I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean..." She shook her head, unable to say what she really wanted to say. "I just wanted to help, and now your mom is angry." He motioned to her to kneel on the floor with him. She hesitated, then did as he asked. She sat opposite of him and waited for him to say something. "Mom has 6 children. She's always upset about one thing or another." His smile was so big and bright that she couldn't help but return it. "So you're not mad at me?" He shrugged. "Which color do you want to be?" "Yellow," she said without hesitation. "Unless you want to be yellow, then I'll be green." "I don't want to be yellow, Jenna. I don't want to be yellow, Jenna. And even if I did, I wouldn't mind letting you be yellow, if you really wanted to be." Why did their discussion over what color they wanted to be warm her heart? She didn't know why, only that it did. It made her feel all fuzzy and sweet inside, kind of like a peach. "What color do you want to be?" she asked. "Blue." Like her, he answered without hesitation. "And no," he continued, "I'm not mad at you. I'm glad you came over." "Me too." Her cheeks were beginning to hurt. She had smiled so much today, but it had been the happiest day she had in a long time, even with the mishap over the plates. Buddy shuffled the cards so they could begin their play. Preeti came in with a book and plopped down on the sofa, with her feet dangling off the edge. "I can't believe you like that baby game too." She opened her book and stuck her nose inside, obviously not expecting a response. "It's not a baby game," Buddy protested. She could hear the irritation edging in way into his voice. She reached across the game board and laid her hand on top of him. He didn't move away, but his gaze zoomed to hers, those rusty brown eyes filled with questions. Jenna gave her head a little shake, then smiled. Buddy turned his hand so the palm was up, but he didn't pull away, and they sat there for minutes, maybe even hours, palms pressed together as they looked at each other. "I like it," Buddy said, but Jenna wasn't sure if he was talking about the game or their hands touching, hoping it was both. What happened to your hair?" Jenna asked. She had noticed it when she first first arrived, but she had been upset with Mommy and hadn't asked about it. Then the plates. She hadn't wanted to ask over their meal where everyone could hear, but something had happened to it. The very front of it next to his skin was short, cut down to almost nothing. Not much of it, but enough she had noticed. The sides and back were the color of a hayfield just before harvest. The top was the same color, she supposed, but instead of looking freshly washed, it looked like he had taken a lard and clumped it on there, then combed it through. But he didn't smell like lard. He smelled like baby lotion. He got licked by a cow when he wasn't a baby. He got licked by a cow when he was a baby. Prudy laughed, then turned her attention back to her reading. It didn't look like that the first time I saw you. Buddy turned a fine shade of red. I was trying to get this piece here to lie flat, but it wouldn't. So you cut it? Jen asked. He nodded. After trying to smooth it with baby lotion? Like a girl, Prudy teased. Hush up, Prudy, or I'll go get Mom. It's true, his sister continued without looking up this time. I think it looks like, she paused, unable to tell an outright lie, but not wanting to hurt his feelings either. It looks terrible, Prudy said. Hush, Prudy. Jenna might have covered her own mouth with her hand had she not been almost holding hands with Buddy. Almost. It's true, she continued with a shrug. Buddy leaned into the coffee table over the game board and a little closer to Jenna. It doesn't look good, he admitted. His grin was so charming, she couldn't concentrate on anything but it. It'll grow, she said, and baby lotion washes out. He nodded and leaned back. Suddenly she missed having him that close. They sat that way for a few moments, just looking at each other without speaking, without looking away. It felt a little like heaven. My hand's tingling, she said quietly in hopes that Prudy wouldn't hear. You should move your fingers, Buddy said. He lifted her hand by the wrist and shook it back and forth. Need to get the blood back into them. I'm good. Jenna pulled her hand away before he slung her fingers clean off. She shouldn't have said anything. She hadn't meant that her fingers were tingling because they had fallen asleep, but that, well, she wasn't sure what she meant. But something seemed to be happening between them. Something a little weird. Not entirely pleasant, but definitely not unpleasant in the least. It was confusing, and it confused her. She wanted to grab his hand and place hers on top of it again to see if that same thing would happen a second time. But perhaps it was better that they stopped touching. It might give her a chance to figure some of it out. One thing was certain. It wasn't something she had ever experienced before.
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6. Buddy stared out the kitchen window, the one over the sink, and thought back to Sunday afternoon. He never much cared for the rain one way or another, but now he was pretty sure he loved rainy days. Or maybe he just loved sitting across from Jenna, who didn't call Candyland a baby game, even though they both knew that it was. Instead, she had played with him all afternoon, while the rain had fallen outside. It had been the single best afternoon of his entire life, even beating the time his dad took him fishing and in Catoosa. But there were a few parts of the time they had spent together that confused him, like when she had put her hand over his. He could have sat that way all afternoon. A person only needed one hand free to play Candyland. It took a little longer that way, but it could be done. Buddy knew he had broken his arm a few years ago, back and had been in a cast from the top of his elbow to the knuckles on his hand. It had been a while before he was able to use it again, and that had meant many one-handed games of Candyland. Not easy, but not impossible. But then her hand had fallen asleep, and he'd done his part to get the blood flowing again. Saying that your hand fell asleep didn't really mean that it had fallen asleep. He had something to do with blood flow. Asleep. It had something to do with blood flow. One of his teachers had explained it to him in school after he'd fallen. He had just gotten He'd just gotten up after sitting on his foot, and she had helped him and explained that the tingly feeling meant the blood wasn't right, and that he should be careful. But he was pretty sure that a person didn't have to be careful when it was their hand. Most people weren't walking around on their hands, but it could still be annoying. Hey! Buddy jumped, nearly knocking over his glass of milk. Jonah, he cried. You scared me. Sorry. Not really. Did I get you good? Buddy nodded. You got me. You got me good. Jonah slid into the seat across the table from him and pulled Buddy's saucer toward him. Are you going to eat this? Buddy shook his head. He had wanted it when he sat down, but then something outside had snagged his attention, and he had lost track of time, and his desire to have a piece of the coconut cake Jenna's mommy had made for their Sunday dinner had fizzled away. This is amazing. Jonah pointed to the cake with his fork, his mouth still full of food. Buddy nodded. I know. Mom didn't make this. It wasn't a question. Mom hated everything coconut, so they never got to have sweets made with the tropical fruit. In fact, only Jonah, Prudy, and Buddy liked coconut, which was why there was so much of the cake still left. Enough that they were still eating it on Wednesday. Jenna's grandmother made it. Jonah shoveled in another bite. Are you sure you don't want this? I'm sure. Are you sick? His brother asked. Buddy was never one to turn down sweets. Nah. And he wasn't. He had one piece already, but he didn't want to admit that to his brother. Not when he was enjoying the cake so much. Not even lovesick? Jonah grinned. Buddy shook his head. Can you get sick from love? It means you're falling in love, and it makes you do things like stare out the window and give your brother your tasty snack. I wasn't staring out the window, Buddy protested. Was I? Yeah, Jonah nodded. How do you know if you're in love? Buddy asked. Jonah choked, sputtered, coughed, and beat on his chest. Are you okay? Buddy jumped to his feet and pounded his brother on the back. Are you okay? Do you need some water? Jonah wiped his eyes and coughed one last time. You want to know about love? Buddy sat back down and nodded. When a person falls in love, how do they know? Jonah paused, as if contemplating every word. Do you think you might be in love? Could he tell his brother the truth? And that's when he knew things were changing. He could always talk to Jonah about everything. Now he was wondering if some things should be kept to himself. I'm asking for Jonathan, he lied. He wants to know, but, he didn't know who to ask. I told him to talk to you, but he still wasn't sure. That should cover it. He waited for Jonah to respond. So he asked you to ask me for him? Yeah, of course. What are brothers for? Jonah nodded, but Buddy couldn't tell if he believed all the stories he had just told him. I suppose that if you can't stop thinking about a girl, that's part of it? I suppose that if you can't stop thinking about a girl, that's part of it? Jenna had been in his thoughts ever since he had first met her. What else? That you want to spend all your time with her? Oh. That you want to spend all your time with her. He wanted to spend most of his time with her, but he couldn't say all. Is there more? Jonah nodded. There are 1,000 little things that are different for each person, but if you or Jonathan stop thinking with your brain and use your heart, or his heart, instead you or he will know without having to ask anyone. Make sense? Yeah, sure. But it didn't. How did someone think with their heart? For the first time in his life, Buddy wasn't so sure about the advice his brother had given him. He had always relied on Jonah in the past, but this was different. This was really important. Maybe I should ask Hannah. Whatever you need to do for Jonathan, Buddy reminded him. He didn't want to hurt his brother's feelings. Jonah grinned for Jonathan. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Jonah leaned a little closer. Buddy, he started, his voice full of questions. Do you think Jonathan is in love? He shrugged, tried to play it off like it was no big deal. Maybe. Does this girl he loves or may not love? He corrected himself. Does this girl love him in return? Buddy thought about Jenna, about her so blue eyes, but they weren't just blue. To say that, to make little of their beauty, but to say more was too much. As simple as it was, they were the most beautiful blue that he had ever seen. And then he remembered how they sparkled when she had held his hand. Maybe you should ask the girl out on a date or take her home from a singing. Yeah, Buddy nodded, then sat back in his seat. You mean Jonathan? Right, Jonathan. That's what he should do, but only if he's serious about her. Buddy thought about it a moment. How serious? Marriage. Serious. Buddy's eyes widened. Marriage? Yeah. We're Amish. We don't date willy-nilly like the English. I mean, some people date a little, but once you start dating, it means that you are ready to settle down, find someone to care about for the rest of your life. Or Jonathan. Buddy nodded. Jonathan, yeah. If a man asks a young woman if he can take her home from a singing, the woman is going to expect for him to be serious about her. Serious enough to marry her. Jonah nodded. You, a guy, has to be careful. It's messing with someone's heart. Yeah, Buddy said. Take a girl home from a singing, then what? Ask her out, Jonah said. Talk to her parents and take her on a date somewhere. Her parents? Buddy asked. Her parents? Buddy asked. Jenna only had a mom and a grandmother. He supposed he could ask them, but what if she doesn't want to go on a date with him? But what if she doesn't want to go on a date with me? Him. If she lets a guy take her home from a singing, then she'll go out on a date. A date with Jenna. The thought was so incredible, he could hardly contain his smile. Taking her home from a singing was exciting enough, but a date? That's what he would do. He would take her home from the singing next Sunday night. Then he would ask her mom if they could go on a date. She would say yes, and then he wasn't sure what happened then. But he could work on that a little closer to time. He had enough in his head right now as it was. So much so that he hopped to his feet. He needed to run or jump or something. He felt like he had ants in his pants. Another saying that didn't really mean what it sounded like. But he was going to go outside, get his puppy, and run all over to rid himself of all this energy that suddenly filled him. Are you going to tell Jonathan? He stopped. It's not really for Jonathan, but he admitted, unable to keep up the lie any longer. Really? Jonah's brows rose in surprise. Not Jonathan? He shook his head and leaned closer to his brother. It's for me. Really? Jonah's eyes were happy, but not teasing. You knew the whole time, didn't you? Boy asked. Jonah held up his hands and smiled. I wasn't going to say anything. He had known it was for Buddy. and he had still given him solid advice. It just showed that he thought Buddy was ready for this step home from a singing, a date, and then the next step, maybe even to boyfriend and girlfriend. The thought was thrilling. He had never had a girlfriend before. It was long past time for Buddy Miller to move on to the next phase of his life. Well, almost. He turned back to his brother. "Do me a favor." Jonah nodded. "Of course. Don't tell Mom." Jenna let out a great sigh of relief when Buddy walked into the barn on Sunday evening. She had seen him at church, but she hadn't gone to talk to him. Of course, there was no way to talk to him during the service, and afterwards. She just kept missing him. It seemed as if the entire congregation was against her. She would start toward him, then someone would stop her, ask her about one thing or another. Was she going to the quilting circle on Tuesday? Had she tried Cora Ann Kaufman's recipe for bison Yamaseti? Did she know that the bison came from Ezra Hines' farm? Had she been there? Had she been out to Tina Lambert's camel farm? Had she been out to Titus Lambert's camel farm, where he milked the camels? She didn't even know a person could milk camels, but that wasn't what she wanted to talk about. She wanted to see Buddy, ask if he was planning on going to the singing, see how his week had been. What had he been doing? She simply wanted to talk to him, but it seemed it wasn't destined to happen. By the time she got free of all the well-wishers who wanted her and her family to feel at home in a new place, he and his family were already gone. It had been hard to hide her disappointment as they had driven home in the buggy, just as she had trouble now hiding her excitement over seeing him again. Susanna Ebersol nudged her elbow into Jenna's ribs. "There he is." "Who?" Jenna asked, trying to act as if she didn't know what Susanna was talking about. "Buddy Miller, you know." "Who?" Jenna wrinkled her forehead to find her confusion. "Oh yeah, I remember." Susanna nudged her again. You think you're clever, but everyone knows that the two of you spent all last Sunday together." Her words made a funny feeling in Jenna's belly. She wasn't sure what it meant, but it was there, like butterflies beating away. "That's not exactly true. My family spent all of last Sunday with his family. From across the barn, he turned her away. From across the barn, he turned her way, and their gazes met. He smiled, and there went those butterflies again. She gave him a hesitant smile in return. She liked him. She thought he liked her too. But how could a girl be sure? Someone next to him, his brother, Jonathan, said something to him, and Buddy turned away. Jenna dropped her attention to the front of her apron. Not that her lap was all that interesting, but she was hoping to find something there to give her a bit of bravery to ask the question she so needed the answer to. Susanna, she started. She twisted her hands in her lap. How does a girl, know when a boy likes her, I mean. Rose Ebersol picked the right time to sit down. Rose Ebersol picked that time to sit down next to them. You shouldn't be asking her. Susanna waved away her sister's protests. I am more than qualified to answer that. Hardly, Rose sniffed. You like Jonathan Miller, but you don't know if he likes you in return. Susanna turned her chin up and rose to and nose to the air. She sent her sister a disdainful look. He likes me. Then she dropped her prideful stance. I think so, anyway. Jenna covered Susanna's hand with her own. I think he likes you. But you wanted to know if a boy likes you. He'll show you in his own way, Rose said wisely. Don't listen to her, Jenna. She's only repeating what Emily told us. It's true, Rose countered. Like how? Jenna asked. Like asking to take you home from a singing. Rose nodded at her own words. Jenna turned to Susanna. Has Jonathan ever taken you home from a singing? Well, no, she sputtered. But he will, one day, I know it. She sat up a little straighter in her seat. He will. Jenna leaned back a little, tried to relax. If Buddy likes me, then he'll ask to take me home from a singing? Yes, Rose said empathetically. Not that it's the only way. Not that it's the only way. She glanced around at all the teenagers gathering together. Coupling off before finding a seat. But it's perhaps the most obvious way. Would Buddy ask her home from a singing? It was the greatest thrill she could imagine, and yet... Don't Jonathan and Buddy come together? She asked. Jonathan used to come by himself. Then Buddy started coming with him. Will Jonathan take you home if he if he has Buddy with him? Susanna shifted in her seat and smoothed her apron. No, and that is exactly why we have to get Buddy to ask to take you home. And the sooner, the better. Are you nervous? Jonathan asked. He had leaned in close to Buddy so only he could hear. No. Yes, maybe a little. Buddy exhaled and tried to slow his heart. His dad had taught him that. Take deep breaths after he ran would slow his heart and allow him to catch his breath. But so would doing the same because he was overexcited and a little too hot. Were the barns always this hot? He had nothing to go on. This was only his second singing in a long while, and he didn't remember from before. His second singing, and with any look, he would be taking the prettiest girl there home. He had a plan, but he had never dreamed it would be this warm. He ran a finger around the inside of his collar. Maybe it was a mistake to wear this shirt. It felt tight, like it was wrapping around him, hugging him, and making him sweat. You okay? Jonathan whispered. Yeah. He took another deep breath. Jonathan spun Buddy to face him and started messing with his shirt. Then he clasped Buddy on the shoulder. You got this. She's been looking over at you all night. I've got a ride home, so you don't have to worry about that. You can drive the buggy as well as anyone here. You know the way. Now go ask your girl if you can take her home. Buddy smiled at his brother's words. Yeah, okay. His heart pounded in his ears as he wound his way through the crowd of teens. He wanted to get to her as quickly as possible, yet he wanted to slow down so he would have more time to get himself together. What if Jonathan was wrong and she hadn't been looking at him? What if she didn't want him to ask her to take her home? What if she didn't like him at all? He stumbled as those last words stabbed through his brain. What if she didn't like him? He would embarrass himself in front of Susanna and Rose Ebersole, and maybe even more people if they were standing close enough to hear. Or she could tell him yes. She could smile that way he loved, and she would be tickled that he wanted to take her home, and hopefully she would understand that it really meant more than a ride home. She would understand that he wanted to take her out again and again, get to know her, and maybe he was getting ahead of himself. He hadn't even asked her yet. And with that thought still echoing, he stopped directly in front of her. He could reach out and touch one of her cap strings. He was that close to her. He wouldn't though, even though he wanted to. He wanted to wind his fingers in a little ribbon and then unwind it and see if it kept any of the curl. He was close enough. He could see the lighter parts of her eyes, the dark rim and the starburst inside that seemed to hold every shade of blue there was. Jenna, he started. Then he shook his head. He sounded dumb, not confident, not at all like Jonah. He might have lost his first girlfriend and had a couple of rough times with his wife, Sarah, but he was still the smartest man Buddy knew. Second smartest, counting Dad. But Buddy had never gotten advice about girls from his dad. His father didn't believe Buddy would ever move away from the farm. He believed Buddy would live out his days with Jonathan and whoever his brother decided to marry. Buddy would be a live-in uncle for their kids, and he would never get married. His dad never said as much, but he never once opposed his mother when she worried about such things at night. "Hi," he said, hoping to just start over. "Hi." The smile on her lips was small and wavered a bit, but it stayed around. Susanna poked her in the ribs and gave her a nudge. Buddy wasn't sure what that was all about, but he couldn't worry about that now. He had a task to complete. "I was wondering, can I take you home tonight? I have the buggy and I know the way." He felt like he was making a mess of this, but she was still smiling. Rose and Susanna were giggling behind their hands. "You want to take me home?" she asked. "What about Jonathan?" "He doesn't want to. Just me." A confused look planted itself across her pretty face. "How will he get home?" "Oh, he's riding with one of his friends." Buddy made a waving gesture in the general direction of where Jonathan stood talking to his friends. They weren't talking as much as they were watching Buddy. Susanna craned her head around to find him in the crowd, but Buddy couldn't pay much attention to her. He only had eyes for Jenna. "Yeah," she finally said. His heart skipped a beat. At least it felt like it. "Yeah?" She smiled and nodded. "Yeah." The wind felt cool on her face as they drove home. It was May and mostly summer, but there were still a few cooler nights peppered in to make the weather more interesting before it got down to business of being a blistering hot summer. Jenna liked traveling by buggy on Sundays. It was a welcome change. But it was even more special sitting next to Buddy as he directed the horse down the road. She liked the fact that it took a little longer to get anywhere by horse and carriage, and that meant that much more time with Buddy. "I'm glad you asked me to ride home with you," she said. She wanted to scoot a little closer to him, but she didn't. She was alone with a man for the first time in her life, and she didn't want him to think badly of her for not behaving like she should. "I'm glad you said yes," he said, his words without taking his eyes from the road. She knew because she had watched him the entire time. She supposed she should be thankful that he was being so careful. "I've never ridden home with a boy before." Why was she telling him those things? Because she wanted him to know how special this was to her. But surely he had to know. "I've never taken a girl home before," he admitted. And they rode along with a silence between them, around them. The horses' hooves clapped against the hard surface of the road. The carriage creaked on its springs, and a few nighttime creatures called to one another. Were Rose and Susanna right when they had told her that this was the first step in courting? What if he just wanted to offer her a ride home? Why is it that he couldn't just want to be... Why is it that he can't just want to be with you? Maybe he could. The thought warmed her from the inside out. He cleared his throat. This is the first time I've driven the buggy by myself." "Really?" she asked. Why? "I learned to drive when I was 10. He nodded. That was before your accident, yeah?" "Yeah." He didn't need to say anything else. She knew what he meant. She had learned to drive because there was a time where she was normal as the next person, but that had changed, and since then, my mom hasn't let me drive since the accident. Not alone, anyways. I understand. But she wasn't sure she did. How come she couldn't drive? Yes, her brain was weakened, but that didn't mean she couldn't keep control of one horse. There hadn't been a lot of things that she did before that she wasn't allowed to do now. Driving was only one of them. Why did you ask to take me home, Buddy Ivan Miller?" she asked. He shrugged one shoulder. "I wanted to." "You wanted to take me home, or you wanted to ask?" "Both." "Both," he laughed. And she liked the sound. It was like a pure joy. She waited for him to continue. I like you. The words were so quietly spoken that at first she missed them. Had they been on a tractor, she wouldn't have heard them at all. You like me? Yeah. He was holding himself so stiffly she thought a strong wind might break him in half. I like you too. He almost slumped right there in his seat. You do? It was her turn to laugh. Of course. You're sweet and funny. I am? He sat up with pride. Yeah. I think you're pretty and you're sweet and funny too. Thank you. There it was again. He said she was pretty without talking about how it was a shame that she had a weakened brain. You don't care that my brain is weak? You don't care that my brain is weak? She asked. He drew back. Your brain isn't weak. It works just fine as far as I can tell. You think so, really? He nodded. I do. Maybe everybody else's brain just works too much. And maybe, she mused, but she couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. He didn't think her brain was weak. They rode along for a moment, just enjoying the feeling of being together. Everyone says I'm special, Buddy finally said. She pulled away so she could better see him. You are special. His face crumpled into a frown. I am not. Don't say that. But, she sputtered, you are the only boy I've ever met who can see past my accident and what it did to me. That's special in my book. They don't mean it that way, he said. To them, it meant that I won't ever get married or have children, that I can't take care of another person or a family, not like an Amish man would. Should be able to. She paused for a moment, thinking about those words and what they meant. The Amish men she had known in her life and the jobs they did to support their families with both money and kindness. I don't believe that, she finally said. You're one of the greatest Amish men I've ever met. And she meant it. But he was honest. He was hardworking, kind, and loved God. What more could a wife and a family want or need? You're going to make me cry, he sniffed. Don't, she patted his arm. Because it's not manly? She shook her head. Because I don't want you to be sad. He wiped his arm across his eyes and smiled at her. I'm not sad. That's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me. Now he was going to make her cry. Well, I meant it. Every word. But he couldn't believe it. It had to all be part of God's plan. He had brought Jenna to Wells Landing so they both could have a life full and worthy. They didn't have to worry about having a weak brain or being special. They were meant for each other. God's plan. I'm glad I met you, Jennifer Abigail Burkhart. I'm glad I met you too. It had been such a pleasant trip home. Such a joy to ride next to her and talk about their feelings. That Buddy hated when he saw her family's mailbox up ahead. If only they had a little more time to talk, to be together. Maybe this was why after taking a girl home from a singing that they started dating. He wanted to spend more time with her. All his time with her. He wanted to know all about her life before she had met him, and he wanted to tell her all about his, share every detail, so it was like they had known each other from birth instead of just met a couple of weeks ago. That's my house, Jenna pointed to the turnoff ahead. Yeah, Buddy cleared his throat. I'll walk you to the door. He pulled the horse to a stop, made sure she wasn't going anywhere, then turned to Jenna. Stay right there. I'm coming around to help you down. She nodded and did as he instructed. He was glad about that. It was another of the tips that Jonathan had told him about dating. He wasn't sure if Jonathan really knew the truth or not, since he himself had never dated a girl, but it sounded like a good idea to Buddy. So Buddy had decided to use it. He came around the front of the horse and looped the reins over the hitching post. Then he reached a hand out to Jenna. She hopped lightly to the ground, and together they walked to the front porch. He liked the feel of her beside him. She was tall for a girl, almost as tall as him, but she was thin and wispy, and it made him feel strong to walk beside her. He wanted to hold her hand as they climbed the steps, but he didn't think it was time for that. How did the guy know? Jonathan hadn't said anything about this part. Instead, Buddy allowed Jenna to go up the steps first, and he followed behind. She stopped at the door and turned to face him. This was the part they had talked about. This was the part where Jonathan said he should kiss her, but not to this date. After many more. Do you want to come in? She asked. If he went inside, he would get to talk to her mom and maybe even her mommy. He could state his intentions, let them know how much Jenna meant to him. Yeah, please. She smiled and went to open the door. But the knob was wrenched from her hand as someone pulled the door open from the other side. Jenna Gale, her mom gasped. What are you doing out here on the porch? With a boy wasn't said out loud, but Buddy heard it. She hadn't said the words, but they were still there. Talking to Buddy, Jenna moved to go inside into the house, and her mom shifted to one side to allow her room, but then stopped back into the middle of the opening once Jenna had passed. But Buddy was blocked, stuck on the porch. And what is Buddy doing out here? Her mom's voice was quiet, kind of smooth, as if she was trying extra hard not to yell. But what about? He gotten Jenna home safely. He smiled, proud of that accomplishment. Jonathan had told him that he could do it, and he had. I brought Jenna home from the singing. Her mom's eyes widened. She looked from Buddy past him to the drive where his horse and carriage waited. Alone? You brought my daughter home by yourself? I did. Mom, Jenna's voice held a pleading note. Hush, Jenna Gale. Charlotte turned her full attention back to Buddy. Thank you, but this shouldn't happen again. Jenna went to the singing with the Bishop's girls, and they should be the ones to bring her home. I don't mind, Buddy said. I do, she returned. Mommy, Jenna screeched from behind her mother. Hush, Jenna Gale. But Buddy stammered. This wasn't going like he had planned, and certainly nothing like Jonathan had prepared him for. What else had Jonathan said about asking a girl's family to date her? He raised his hand to pound his head, then realized what he was doing and pulled his hair instead. I come from a good family. You've met them. Charlotte shook her head. Her mouth had taken on a pinched look. Otherwise, it was like talking to an older version of Jenna. This is not about family. Jenna Gale is... Please don't say special. Please don't say special. Jenna Gale is not ready to have boys bring her home from the singings. I'm 20 years old, Jenna protested. He couldn't see her, but he could hear her. Age has nothing to do with this. It's how grown up you are here. She tapped one finger against her temple. And neither one of you are grown up enough. grown up enough there to be participating in such endeavors. It took him a minute to figure out what she was saying. Then it hit him like an unexpected bale of hay flying down from the hayloft. You don't want us to be together? There is no us in this. You and Jenna Gill need to stay away from each other. But I want to date her. I know what it means to ask a girl on a date. I'm not serious. Charlotte's lips pressed together so tightly that he couldn't see them anymore. Just a line where her mouth had been. I know what you mean. I know what it means too, young man. So you just hop back into your buggy and leave my Jenna Gale alone.